Story begins with a woman named Eleanor waking up in an unfamiliar room that she has never encountered. Michael, the manager and architect of this place, is sitting opposite her. Shocking, but it turns out that she is dead and is now in the afterlife. In the afterlife, there is a good place and there is a bad place. Fortunately, she is in the heavenly afterlife, which is called a good place. After a while, Michael gives her a tour of the area of a good place in which she will live. He explains that a good place is divided into several separate districts, each of which has exactly 322 residents who were perfectly matched to create a harmonious balance. Each district is unique. Some cities have cold weather, some have hot summers, some have a farm, and so on. After the tour, Eleanor, along with some other newcomers, is forced to watch an informational video. In the video, Michael greets them on their first day in a good place in the afterlife. It shows that people are given positive or negative ratings, evaluating every action they perform in their lives. For example, throwing garbage out of the trash can bring you negative scores, while helping someone with directions can lead to positive scores. After a person dies, the architects of the afterlife calculate their total scores, and only people with very high scores are allowed in a good place. Moreover, everyone who is in a good place gets their own house. These houses are specially designed according to their tastes and preferences. In addition, they are also given a soulmate that matches their personality, a person with whom they should spend their eternal life together. After the introductory classes, Michael introduces Eleanor to her cellmate, Chidi, who used to be a professor of ethics. After that, he shows a video showing her memories of the time she was on Earth. It turns out that Eleanor worked as a lawyer who tirelessly defended innocent people on death row and fought for human rights. That's how she earned her place in a good place. However, after Michael leaves, Eleanor realizes that something is wrong. As it turns out, the memories from the video don't belong to her after all. In fact, the architects from the afterlife got a little confused and invited this Eleanor instead of the real one from the video. This imposter Eleanor had a completely opposite life, where she made a living by deliberately selling fake medicines to the sick and elderly. She was rude and selfish. Eleanor knows she's only here because someone with the same name was sent to a bad place instead of her. Soon after, her acquaintance Janet, the source of all information and knowledge for people in a good place. Janet is also responsible for providing residents with any item at their request. She is in fact Siri, which residents of a good place can use primarily as a personal assistant. Then she also gets acquainted with some neighbors. One of them is Tahani, who has been openly and always engaged in charity in her life. But oddly enough, her designated cellmate is a monk who has sworn an oath to remain silent all his life. On this day, a good place is hosting a welcome party for all new residents. However, Eleanor's bad temper is soon revealed. During the party, she calls her neighbor Tahani a giraffe and puts shrimp in her bra to steal some food home. The next morning, something very unusual happens in the neighborhood. Countless shrimps are flying in the sky, giraffes are running around, and even a giant toad is wreaking havoc. It turns out that all this is the result of negative energy that Eleanor releases in a good place. Stunned and worried about what happened, she tells everything to her cellmate Chidi. She even begs him to help her be a good person so that she can stay in a good place, being the good guy that he is. Chidi immediately agrees and begins to teach her ethics lessons. After a few hours, new residents are encouraged to gather on the second day of their orientation. At today's lesson, everyone will be taught to fly, but since there is a mess in the neighborhood, some of them will have to voluntarily restore order. To take advantage of this is a great opportunity to teach Eleanor ethics. Chidi mentions their names. However, the problem is that anyone who volunteers will miss piloting classes. Eleanor hesitates, but she has no choice but to agree. At first, she does her job well and cleans up well here, but when she hears how great it is to fly, she hides the trash in someone's house and goes to join the others. And just like the previous incident, this one has consequences. Soon a big garbage storm will break out, as a result of which Chidi will lose faith in Eleanor. To make matters worse, her secret won't be a secret for long. That evening, Eleanor receives an anonymous letter saying that someone knows that she does not belong here. Panicking, she assumes that her neighbor Tahani is to blame, but just at this moment, she receives another message asking her to meet in the city square. Eleanor quickly follows the instructions and meets the sender, who oddly enough, turns out to be Tahani's cellmate Jason. It turns out that he is not a monk, and just like Eleanor, Jason was also mistakenly put in a good place. He was an amateur J, a drug dealer from Florida, who likes to play video games. But unlike Eleanor, for him it was a walk in the park to hide his secret, since he entered a good place. He was considered a mute monk. Together, Eleanor and Jason try to stay in a good place, but it turns out to be harder and harder, as the latter desperately wants to show her true self. One day at an event, he tries to go on stage and tell everything, but before he does, Eleanor distracts him by spoiling a perfectly cooked cake, that one of her neighbors has been working on for 3 days. Unfortunately, this creates a large funnel in that place, which leads the neighborhood into a state of panic. For days have passed, but the catastrophic funnel is getting bigger and bigger. This makes Chidi very angry, implying that no matter how many times he gives Eleanor ethics lessons, it is impossible to change her nature. Soon their conversation turns into an argument, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor feels guilty. Therefore, she makes a commitment that from now on, she will do only good things. It only took her a few minutes after she died, but that's just the beginning. After a couple of days of worry, Michael still hasn't figured out who's to blame. He begins to doubt his ability to manage, so he announces that he has decided to retire. Everyone is sad to hear this, as they think Michael was a good manager. The next day, the neighbors throw a party before Michael leaves. However, he asks to cancel the party, since retirement for a creature like him does not mean that he can relax. In fact, retirement for him means severe punishment when his soul is destroyed. Hearing this, Eleanor feels extremely guilty and decides to confess everything. That evening, when Michael makes his farewell speech in front of the whole city, Eleanor gets up from her seat and admits that she was a mistake that devastated the neighborhood. As expected, it stuns everyone. The next day, a train arrives ready to take Eleanor to a bad place. Chidi, Jason and Tahani are there to say goodbye. However, before the train departs, Michael feels sorry for Eleanor and vouches for her to stay in a good place, claiming that she has greatly improved and become good. This was proved when she confessed the truth to save Michael. The problem is that the real Eleanor was taken to a good place to replace the fake one. Moreover, the authorities also found out after checking that Jason was also wrongfully accepted into a good place. Michael talks to one of his bosses, claiming that they have both changed, but the boss decides that at least 2 people from here should go to a bad place. He doesn't care which 2. After that, Eleanor, her cellmate Chidi, Jason and his cellmate Tahani are sent to a discussion room. Eleanor claims that it must be her and Jason, since these 2 were sent here by accident. However, Jason doesn't want to leave. As their arguments become increasingly heated and frustrating, Eleanor laments how excruciating it is, until a revelation hits Eleanor. She comes to the conclusion that they are not in the best place at all, and that in fact, they are in a bad place. Besides, they are actually being tortured by Michael himself. She believes that since they have been in this place, they are never happy. The 4 of them tortured each other not by accident, but intentionally. When Eleanor tells Michael and his boss about her discovery, they begin to laugh angrily. It was all true. Soon Michael will reveal everything. After being a disciple in a bad place for 200 years, he was finally given the chance to design his own neighborhood. But he didn't want to create a normal bad place. Instead of standard physical torture, people would end up torturing each other psychologically. He believes that mental torture can be as terrible as physical. So Michael chose 4 people, and his intention was that their conflicting personalities would lead to them torturing each other in various ways. He also reveals that the other 318 inhabitants are actually demons playing the role of people in paradise. Moreover, the real Eleanor is actually played by another actor, a demon named Vicky. Eleanor then wonders why Tahani and Chidi ended up in a bad place, because they are supposedly good and moral people. However, Tahani immediately realizes that she was sentenced to a bad place because her charitable deeds on Earth were motivated not by genuine altruism, but by a selfish desire for attention. As for Chidi, Michael clarifies that this happened because of his tough and indecisive behavior, which he refused to correct in any way, despite the fact that he knew it was making his friends and family unhappy. Having exposed his scheme, Michael begs his boss Sean to redo it by erasing the person's memories and changing some parameters, to which the latter agrees. In a last desperate attempt to do something, Eleanor remembers that the only non-actor here is a robot similar to Siri Janet. So, she rips a page out of one of Chidi's books and writes herself a message, which she then hides in Janet's mouth. Eleanor then taunts Michael, saying he will never win, but in response, he just snaps his fingers and erases the man's memories. The next thing we know, Eleanor wakes up in the waiting room again, and Michael takes her around the neighborhood. After he takes her home, Janet appears and gives Eleanor a note that she wrote to herself. It says, "Eleanor, find Chidi." In the next scene, Eleanor finds Chidi at a welcome party. She shows him the paper and explains how she got it. But as expected, Chidi doesn't believe her. And yet, she convinces him to come to her house. However, just as she is about to discuss the matter, Michael enters, followed by several other people, including Tahani, Jason and Eleanor's new cellmate. And just like in the previous case, they all start bickering, and this time, it doesn't take Eleanor long to realize that they are not in the best place. Worried, Michael erases their minds again and reboots his plan for the 3rd time, lying to his boss Sean that he is still on the second tour. However, no matter how many times he tries to change it, from giving people different soulmates to changing the environment, Eleanor eventually finds out his true nature again and again. Not only that, but with each reboot, the four people seem to become better personalities, and even learn about the trick faster and faster. As expected, Michael gets more and more upset over time. When he makes attempt number 802, he goes outside to a neighborhood meeting where only the demon actor Vicky is present. She complains that everyone is so sick of constant reboots that they often can't even remember what their job is. When Michael tries to clarify, Vicky mentions that he lost control of the experiment, so the other demons went on strike. She then presents a list of their requirements, which includes that she will take over the next reboot. Michael is outraged and quickly refuses the demand, but Vicky blackmails him, saying that if he does not comply, she will tell his boss Sean about the 800 reboots. This will surely lead to his retirement. Michael is clearly upset, but that's when an idea comes to him. He goes to Eleanor's house, where she, Chidi and Tahani, and Jason join them. It looks like once again, they already know what's in the bad place. Eleanor says they keep solving the riddle of the good place, so they win and he loses. However, Michael says he wants to team up with them. He details his plan. He will reboot the neighborhood, but secretly leave the memories of the four people intact. Then, they will pretend to suffer emotionally for a long time, not realizing that this is a fake good place. If they refuse, the experiment will be considered a failure, and everything will go downhill. Michael himself will be retired and burned forever, while people will switch to traditional physical torture. Michael also claims that he can get the four of them and himself to a really good place if they succeed in their plan. They agree, but Eleanor adds conditions. As a member of the team, Michael must also participate in Chidi ethics classes. Then, the area is rebooted again, and Vicky becomes the main caretaker. Over the next few months, four people pretend to be emotionally distressed and unaware of the fake good place. Every day they meet secretly with Michael, where they are also joined by Janet, whose goal is to serve people. Their Chidi teaches them ethics. It is difficult for Michael to understand these concepts due to the fact that he is an immortal being, whose sole purpose is to torment people. He admits to Eleanor that it is difficult for him, and wonders how she was able to improve so much. Eleanor claims that whenever she did a bad thing, she heard a small voice telling her that it was wrong. When she did good, it passed and she felt better. Michael finds comfort in this. Time passes, and one day, Michael was unexpectedly visited. It's his boss Sean, congratulating him on the success of the experiment and promoting him. He shows that, based on the records, four people were subjected to the same tortures as those in the worst place. Michael then pretends to reveal to the four people that they are actually in a bad place. However, to their great shock, Sean informs them that since the experiment was a success, they want to study everything that happened here. Four people will now be transferred to the traditional section of a bad place for torture. Their brains will be studied as it should be. The group is devastated. In particular, Eleanor feels as if Michael betrayed them, but claims that he didn't know anything about it. Eleanor begins to scold him, since now they are doomed. But Michael says there is one solution. They have to escape from a good place, and for this they need to meet with a judge who lives in a portal in the middle of a bad place. Then, all people should individually confirm their claims that they deserve to live in a good place. People are skeptical about this idea, but since they have no other options, they agree. Then Eleanor, Chidi, Tahani, Jason, Michael, and Janet take the train to the headquarters of Bat Place. After a long journey, they reach the residence of the immortal omniscient Judge Jen and try to convince her that they deserve to be in a good place. However, the judge shows that not a single person has been accepted into a good place in the last 531 years. Shocked to learn about this, Michael argues that the scoring system is inherently flawed, since the growth of globalization of industrial capitalism has simply made it impossible for any person to be managed well enough. After much debate, the judge agrees that there is a flaw in the system that they should fix immediately. To solve this problem, she holds a meeting and calls some others to discuss the issue. Then the team makes a suggestion. In the current system, people get one chance at life, get evaluated, and get the final fate. But in Michael's fake good place, four people had hundreds of lives because of reboots, and thanks to them, they were getting better and better. Consequently, they assume that the life of people on Earth will not be seen as a test of their ultimate fate, but simply as an elementary class. After death, a person's total score will give them a place to start. All of them will be tested as simulated environments similar to Michael's neighborhood, created by two architects, one from a good place, and one from a bad one. They will create a scenario that will expose a person's moral shortcomings. At the end of the scenario, the architects will sit down with them and assess what they need to work on, and then they will be rebooted. Participant Dana asks how this will help, because they will forget everything when they reboot. Eleanor explains that what they discussed will stay with them, like a quiet voice in their head. People will go through this as many times as it takes in each new life. Most people will improve until they become the best versions of themselves. Some people won't do it, but most will, which will get them into a good place. Impressed by the carefully thought-out plan, the judge agrees to the new system, much to the man's delight. To launch the system from the first level, they need to identify the first 1,000 people to be tested. In the next scene, the first batch of test areas is up and running. When Eleanor and her group pass by a crowded place, they suddenly hear the sound that the system makes when someone passes a test for a good place. Excited, they ask Michael who passed the test, and the latter replies that there are 4 of them. The judges decided that they didn't need to take any tests, as they saved more people by offering this new system, and it costs a lot of points. After a while, a golden balloon descends from the sky to send them to a real good place. 4 people are accompanied by Janet and Michael, and the latter says that he wants to travel a little soon. The balloon takes off. After a few moments, the squad finally gets to the right place. The Good Place Committee welcomes everyone as heroes and tells Michael to go with them, as they want to bring him in as the official architect of the Good Place. People walk through the portal to their welcome party, which has decorations and memorabilia related to all 4 of their personal tastes. Janet also says that there are 2 green doors that are located all over the Good Place, through which a person can visit any time or place, real or imaginary. Upon hearing this, Jason rushes to fulfill the dream of his life, to race go-karts with monkeys. On the other hand, Chidi Eleonora is confronted with the legendary philosopher, Hypatia of Alexandria. Chidi, in ecstasy, tries to ask her about her work, but she is tongue-tied, in fact, not capable of anything but small talk. She then tells them that things in a good place aren't quite what they seem. Theoretically, a good place is an ideal paradise where all your needs and desires are instantly satisfied. But in the end, the novelty of this pleasure wears out the mind, turning it into mush. Then, Hepatitis shows that she does not even remember what works she is famous for on Earth. Tahani herself sees what Hepatitis has discovered, communicating with other residents who are in even worse condition, since they are all sluggish hedonists who can only speak in a monotonous tone when communicating with her. Everyone has turned into a bunch of insensitive zombies who are unbearably bored after they have experienced literally everything. Now they have nothing else to do but wait out the rest of eternity. Meanwhile, the committee presents Michael with a beautiful robe and a medal. They also force him to sign a large scroll that makes him an architect, and as soon as it is signed, the committee members grab him and run out of the room, saying that Michael is now officially in charge of a good place. After a while, the squad will regroup. Jason, who has just returned, shows that karting races against monkeys got bored very quickly, proving that a good place is not capable of pleasing anyone forever. After discussing it, they realized that was why the committee left. They knew they had a problem, but they couldn't think of any way to solve it other than finding more ways to fulfill a wish. Just then, Eleanor comes up with a theory. She says that every person is a little sad all the time because he knows that he will die, but this knowledge is what gives meaning to life. However, here, in a good place, they don't have it. Therefore, during the party, when all the residents of a good place gathered, Eleanor and her group offer their idea of being able to leave this place forever. If someone wants to leave, they can leave through the door, but that will mean they can never come back. Hearing this, the crowd stares for a while, but then bursts into shouts. They really like this idea, and they start having fun. In a few weeks, we will find out that the system is working. Michael and Janet meet regularly with Judge January and the architects to discuss how things are going. And, although there are some bumps on the road, millions of people are properly sent to their destinies. Meanwhile, those who are in a good place make the choice to leave as soon as they are ready. The first of Eleanor's squad to make a decision is Jason. He won a perfect game in the Madden NFL. After thousands of attempts, Andy has reached his goal in the afterlife. He emotionally tells his friends about his decision, and then throws a big farewell party before leaving. Meanwhile, Tahani spends her afterlife mastering all the practical skills she can think of. She knows that going through the door would be a waste of all the knowledge she has gained, so she decides to apply it all to become an architect. Like Michael, Chidi and Eleanor enjoyed studying the works of famous philosophers and communicating with their friends and family members who got to a good place. However, one day, Eleanor finds out that Chidi is also ready to leave and is determined to keep him with her. But when she realizes that it would be selfish to force him to stay, she says goodbye to him with tears in her eyes. On their last night together, Chidi assures Eleanor that he will always be with her. In a way, when the next morning comes, she wakes up alone in bed, with the last parting gift from her cellmate. Eleanor feels ready to leave, but Michael also wants to go through the door, as he feels that he has achieved everything and no longer knows what to do now. When the judges stop their sessions because of how well the new system works, but since the last door was not made for him, Eleanor comes up with an idea. She convinces Judge Jen to let Michael go to Earth and live as a human being. And in the blink of an eye, the former archetype of a bad place turns into a person. Before leaving, he promises Janet that they will see each other again in his new human life. Michael makes friends, makes mistakes, learns from them, and experiences something new. A few weeks later, Eleanor, who now feels whole, shares the last margarita and chats with Janet. The show ends when they embrace, and Eleanor finally walks through the last door.